Uploading.
See, the Prime Directive has many different functions, not the least of which is to protect us.
So, interestingly enough, this video essay originated with the theory that Starfleet violates its own rules so that a policy of imperialistic colonization could occur. But the more research I do, the more I've come to realize that the actual truth is, the Federation likely uses Starfleet's Prime Directive as a way to legally safeguard Starfleet, and then use Starfleet as a propaganda talking point while Federation member worlds enact a policy of imperialist expansion. Let's just get into it.
The Prime Directive is not a matter of degrees. It is an absolute.
Before we can go too far into this interesting topic, we need to break down the Prime Directive, or at least a part of it. The Prime Directive, as far as I can tell, has at least 47 suborders. The ones we are interested in today are the prohibition against providing knowledge of other inhabited worlds to non-warp capable societies, taking actions to generally affect a society's overall development, helping societies escape the negative consequences of its own actions, and/or helping them escape a natural disaster, unless they ask for aid, and interfering with the internal affairs of a society. Absolutely no one in the fandom will be surprised to know that we have contradictory information. Most dialogue throughout the franchise, however, seems to indicate that the Prime Directive is primarily a policy that is specific to Starfleet. There are some events and dialogue that could lean the way of civilians being impacted, but these seem to be in very specific circumstances. Additionally, and this is kind of vital, it appears that there is a difference made between a Federation spaceship and a Starfleet starship.
You're a clever liar, Captain Kirk. Maricus was a spaceship captain. I've observed him thoroughly. Your species has no such strength. He commands not just a spaceship, Proconsul, but a starship.
You can't force us to go.
Mr. Ramsey is correct, Counselor. The Odin was not a starship, which means her crew is not bound by the Prime Directive.
That's very important because we then need to take a look at how to apply the Prime Directive. We know that Starfleet officers are held to this directive. That's not in contention. We also know that, at a minimum, civilians that either work for or with Starfleet are also required to follow the Prime Directive.
I realize it will only provide atmosphere for a limited area on the surface, but it will be enough to save one village.
I have no intention of compounding what you have done by committing another gross violation of the Prime Directive.
However, after looking at all that, it appears that this policy doesn't extend past the purview of Starfleet itself. This includes other vessels. As we see with Data, the Odin is a spaceship and is not bound by those laws. In fact, we see no real evidence that there are any comparable laws to Federation citizens or Federation member worlds. The member worlds is a key point, so keep that in your mind. We'll come back in a minute. Only Starfleet has to be concerned with this process. Honestly, there is an unnerving inference to the entire discussion when you consider all of this. Remember, Data was put on trial in a Starfleet court that was said to have lasting implications. If that's true, and laws in Starfleet and laws in the Federation are distinct, then it's possible that you could have rules within Starfleet that can determine whether someone is or is not a slave, and those within the Federation and member worlds which determine if someone is or is not a slave for themselves. But that's a discussion for another time. To recap all of this, Starfleet's general orders and the Prime Directive is specific to Starfleet and only to those whom have taken an oath or are bound to them. At an individual level, this may not be as bad as it might seem. From all things observed, the Federation is a government that is somehow a communist utopia when it needs to be, capitalist organization when it needs to be, and a socialist haven when it needs to be. Within this magical place of magicness, it appears that most citizens rely on Starfleet, or specifically Federation member worlds, for their needs in respect to space travel. This includes, but isn't limited to, trade, travel, and defense. Usually, when we see vessels, they are either Starfleet vessels or ships owned by member worlds. This ranges from scientists to military personnel. Now, I'm not saying that no civilian owns a vessel. Quite clearly they do. However, for most of the Federation, it seems like there is a large reliance on the state. If this is true, then breaking the Prime Directive isn't as big a concern as we might think, because citizens generally don't have the ability to. However, it is still strange that there are no real laws that work similar to that of the Prime Directive, almost as if it was done on purpose.
And isn't that what the Prime Directive was truly intended to do? To allow cultures to survive and grow naturally?
Not exactly. The Prime Directive was designed to ensure non-interference.
Which brings us to the original point of the essay. As I've stated before, when I first started this, I was going to discuss how Starfleet violates its own policies so that it can colonize. And the reason why it would have to violate its own policies is because, conceivably, you could never colonize a planet as it would impact, harm, or even annihilate current or future civilizations. This even includes planets that have no sentient, sapient individuals just yet. And again, just relax, we're going to talk about all of it in a second. Now, in relation to Starfleet, as I've shown, I don't think they engage in colonization processes. What I do think happens is that the Federation will colonize a planet, and once this is done, it now falls under the purview of the Federation, and thus Starfleet can move in to assist. And honestly, it makes the most sense. If there is no requirement to worry about impacts to other species for the Federation, then colonization wouldn't be an issue. This would explain why the laws are as lax as they are, though one might argue that there would be an attempt to limit it to member worlds, that individuals couldn't do it, but for whatever reason, we don't see that. This makes the process pretty streamlined. Federation colonizes, Starfleet protects. Now, the question may come up that why does the Prime Directive prevent any kind of colonization? Even if Federation member worlds had a form of the Prime Directive or was bound by it, how would this prevent them from ever going to another planet and colonizing it? The answer is pretty simple. It's because any impact to an ecosystem, even if you don't have sapient, sentient life on it yet, will have a profound effect in the future.
What we do today may profoundly affect the future. If we could see every possible outcome,
we'd be gods, which we're not.
It could do anything from preventing sapient, sentient life from forming to creating a new type of life. A planet that has the ability to sustain life will always have the potential to foster a civilization. From a world with one single-cell organism to one that has a post-warp civilization, anything you do will have a profound impact. And the only difference between the single cell and the post-warp civilization is time. The argument is, can you do it at certain stages? Because if you can, then where is the line? If you can annihilate a single-celled organism to create your own colony, why not do it to a luscious forest planet with mindless beasts? And if you can do it to them, why not a single tribe of people? Why be so speciest? Perhaps one might argue that the Federation has technology that predicts the outcome of a planet's development. There's two problems with this. First, if this technology exists, why doesn't Starfleet use it to determine if they will help a pre-warp civilization that is in trouble?
Temporal incursion in progress.
What happened? Had you actually eradicated that comet, all life within 50 light years would never have existed. Congratulations, you almost wiped out 8,000 civilizations. Spacefaring civilizations evolved and colonized the entire sector. By erasing the comet, I altered all evolution in this region.
Secondly, it either discounts random situations, such as the existence of a meteor hitting a planet that then becomes a civilization, or it turns it into a slippery slope. If a planet cannot sustain life, and never will, but a meteor could hit it and create life, what percentage is acceptable to go ahead and colonize? Is a 5% chance of an asteroid hitting worth not colonizing? What about 1%? Less than a percent. If you can colonize at 5%, why not 10? Hell, why not 30? You see how this becomes a moral concern. I really do have my doubts the attack exists at all, but it doesn't answer any questions. Focusing back at the Prime Directive, again, it just simply can't exist in Federation civil law, which makes everything a tidy arrangement. Federation colonial vessels move in on a planet that does not have a quote-unquote civilization. They are protected by Starfleet ships, being that they are Federation citizens. These Federation citizens colonize a planet, which then allows Starfleet to send down resources to assist Federation citizens on a now claimed planet. This would allow for a massive expansion with the use of resources of Starfleet without requiring the scientific and military organization to get its hands dirty. You simply rinse and repeat and continue to expand your borders and still say that you're not going to harm the locals. The only way, in theory, for the Federation to follow the Prime Directive would be to only colonize planets that have established warp and don't wish to keep their systems to internal affairs. They don't want autonomy. Guys, I understand that this is a bit far out there. You might think that I'm running out of topics. I'm really not. I could go back to doing battle breakdowns at any point. I just find this interesting. I don't think it's unreasonable, but those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, and remember, guys, all of our lives are a story. Make yours a good one.
Listen, Lord Reloaded, if it wasn't for how damn good you are in bed, I wouldn't even talk to you. I just want you to know that.